Okay, so after seeing videos, tons of videos being shared by atheists and Muslims, interestingly enough, seeking to justify their own book, but seeing people share videos about slavery in the Bible, um, and understandably, particularly people of color have an issue with the Bible because to them, it doesn't make any sense for any black person to be a Christian, being that the Bible talks about slavery, and it actually does talk about slavery. It says a whole lot about slavery. Actually, in fact, the Old Testament uses the word Ebed or Eved according to Strong's Hebrew Concordance. The Old Testament uses that word, which is generally the word that is translated as slave. That word is used 800 times in the Old Testament. And in the Greek New Testament, because the New Testament was written in Greek, it wasn't written in Hebrew. The Greek word that is translated as slave is the word doulos. Now that word doulos appears in the New Testament 127 times. So in the Bible total, according to Strong's Concordance, the word that is translated as slave is used 927 times in the whole Bible. So I was going to look at every verse and break down each one and have like the most full understanding of exactly what the word means, but no, that is too much. That'd be like a 10-year video. What I did do was I looked at the concordance, I looked at the definition it gave, which is I'm going to share with you. I'm going to actually show you, and what I did was I picked verses of the Bible that I felt like gave the widest example of the most depth to what that word actually means. I did watch a few videos done by other people first, because to be honest, I was being lazy, and rather than make the video, I thought I could just find a good one that I agreed with to share. But I was disappointed in the way that Christians went about discussing slavery, because I felt like it wasn't completely honest. It wasn't at the very least, it wasn't as deep as it should have been, the study or the explanation or whatever. At the worst, they weren't being very honest. So what I saw didn't satisfy me, so here I am making this video. Bear with me, I do talk a lot, and so you're not going to have to stare at my ugly mug the whole video. I'm going to show you the concordance, where we can actually see the instance of the word every single time it occurs in the scripture. Again, the Hebrew word Ebed or Eved, which is translated as slave, and the Greek word doulos, which is translated as slave. We're going to talk about what exactly the word means. We're going to look at some various contexts in which it is used. We're going to talk about the context of the culture, because one big thing that we need to understand when we're looking at either stuff from a different culture or stuff from a different time period, or in this case both, Israeli or I forgot the word for it, but ancient Middle Eastern culture is dramatically different from what we have here in America, or even in Europe, or you know what I mean. So anytime you're reading something, that's a good practice. Secondly, we're going to look at context. We're going to look at verses around the occurrences of the words in question, because that is just a good practice when you're studying any kind of literature. What I think is odd is that it's only religious texts where people just read like one verse or one chapter and think they understand the whole thing. People don't do that with legal documents. People don't do that with medical records. They don't do that with anything but religious texts, which is weird. You shouldn't do that with any literature. You read everything. You read as much as you can to have the proper context. So we're going to look at context. We're going to look at and I'm going to show you the concordance so that you can on your own go back and look at every instance of the word slave and how it appears and how it is used. And then we're going to start with the Old Testament. We're going to look at the New Testament. And then we're going to look at some of the more particular verses that people are really interested in, such as Deuteronomy 21 and in Leviticus, where it talks about you can have slaves, and beating a slave and that sort of thing. The real stuff that people really want to talk about. So I think it would be unfair to go into those without looking at context first, because again, that's just not how you study the Bible. You don't just dive into the middle of something. We're going to look at the context of I want to say the law, I guess, that God gave, because those were laws given by God. We're going to look at the law in the structure that God is setting up for the society of Israel, because he was talking to them specifically, and which goes into the broader context of, but we'll talk about that later, which goes into the broader context of whether or not those scriptures are even relevant for today. So we're going to talk about that, whether or not they're relevant for us. And even if they aren't relevant for us today, was it appropriate for the time that it was given? Is God a monster? So we're going to look at all those things, and just bear with me, and I'll do my best to try to keep everything neat and organized when I start showing you stuff.